Welcome to Calcio FC, your weekly dose of Italian football culture. This week, we celebrate one of Italy's iconic legends, his birthday, Roberto Baggio. But before we do that, let's drop in on Juventus with me, David Freeney, your host of Calcio FC, and our senior writers, Dan Canzian and Emmet Gates. Welcome, gents. It's time to talk about Juventus, the case study of Juventus. Interesting, after 3 consecutive Serie A wins, the impact of the last one could be massive. Change the complexion of their series, change the mood around Thiago Motta as well. That impact, the win over Inter, and what it means. We're going to go to Dan. I'll throw to you on this. What does it mean?
Well, I think at the moment it means nothing just yet because they have to back it up. But, joking aside, it's massive for them, isn't it? The fact that it's not just beating Inter Milan, as you said, their main rivals. It's the way they beat them. I thought the first half you were hanging on. The first 45 minutes Inter should have been 1, 2, possibly 3 goals ahead. But they came back in the second half and they absolutely dominated the second half. They stopped Inter from playing, and that's probably the biggest compliment you can pay to them because they were so much better than Inter. The Inter had no answer for them, and the minute Conceição scored, you never thought Inter were going to come back. They look flat. They look out of ideas. They look second best. And again, that's probably the biggest compliment you can pay Juve. Motta had Inzaghi's number in the second half.
Let's go to Emmet. Let's talk about the Derby d'Italia and what it means, why it's called the Derby. I know that there was a lot of, we'll say, arguments over social media on the weekend. People, and especially targeting Adam Summerton, who was our guest last week. You haven't seen that, go and check it out on our YouTube channel. But people, they don't understand the history behind why it's called the Derby d'Italia. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you alluded to, we saw, not say the abuse, but Adam Summerton, who was, as you said, was on the pod last week, was getting some feedback on, obviously, he termed it the Derby d'Italia.
And people watching on TNT Sports.
Yeah, exactly. And people hear the word derby and think, well, Juventus are in Turin and Inter are from Milan. How is it a derby? But the term was coined by the legendary sports writer Gianni Brera in the 1960s. And it basically alludes to the fact that Juve and Inter are the most successful teams in the history of Italian football. They won the most trophies. They have the most prestige. They have the biggest fan bases. So basically, it's known as the Derby of Italy, even though there's no geographical proximity to each other in the way that Inter and Milan is, or Roma and Lazio. But it's basically, as we said in the stadium, David, in our video, it's all about prestige and titles, and that's why it was coined the Derby.
It's the same dynamic that you will have in England with Manchester United and Liverpool, that you'll have with like PSG and Marseille in France, or
Real Madrid
Bayern Munich and
Barcelona.
Borussia Dortmund, Barcelona and Real Madrid. I mean, there is no proximity on the geographical level, even though there's only about 90 minutes between Turin and Milan.
Yeah.
But when you look at the standing of the two clubs, the prestige, as Emmet said, the fans, it is probably the biggest game in Italian football, arguably after the Derby, the Milan Derby, I think.
Let's talk about some analysis, the impact of new players at Juventus. Dan Colomuani.
I mean, it is being super for them. It's interesting, actually, because Juve spent so much money in the summer. They spent about £150 million on players. And the best player is someone who signed on loan.
He's some player, though. He's not an unknown.
No, he's not an unknown. But it does make you think, though, like, the fact that he was available in January for a start, and the fact that there was seemingly no competition for him. I know, like...
I think it depends what mindset they're in at the time in that January window, and if they've fallen out with their current manager at their other club, and then if there's a big enough club to go to.
I think it speaks. I think, Juventus deserve credit for identifying him as available to start with.
And he can thank Vlahovic.
Picking him up because... you would have thought that the likes of Premier League clubs would be all over him. He's a proven quality striker, still young. He's very versatile because he's not a traditional number 9. He can play across the front three. And it's been transformational for Juventus. He scored 5 in his first 3 games. The first player to do so since Roberto Baggio, I believe, in the
1990.
In 1990. And his performance on Sunday night was fantastic. That goal doesn't happen unless he plays that pass through to Conceição while being fouled. I mean, I thought, watching on TV, I thought he's going to give a penalty here.
Yeah.
And then he still managed to thread the pass through for Conceição, who then did his bit. look, it's great. Colomboani has been superb. I think the question now is, what do Juve do? Do they go all out for him in the summer and they sign him on a permanent deal? Or do they send him back
Surely
to
it's a
PSG?
question of if he can maintain this form.
Yeah.
But surely you will take a gamble on him. But that's the question, I think. Like,
How are they going to
much?
pay for it?
Well, exactly.
I think there is, I read in Gazzetta this week, there is discussions that Juve would take him on another loan, a full season next year, and then attempt to sign him in the summer of 2026.
And that all plays into their financial
Yeah.
They
master
did
plan.
that with
Exactly.
Morata, didn't they? They signed him for 2 consecutive seasons on loan. It just seems bizarre, though, doesn't it?
Another player that's had a massive impact is the actual goal scorer, Francisco
Yeah.
Conceição, Emmet, that impact.
Yeah, exactly. If you look at the numbers, he hasn't been that particularly stellar. It's like
3 goals.
3 goals and 5 assists.
But still,
But
As
but
a
I
wide
think
man.
it's when you're at the stadium, you realize the work ethic, the defensive diligence that he carries out. He's always constantly harassing the opposition players. And I think it's when you compare Conceição to someone like Rafael Leao, who's really good going forward, but defensively doesn't put in a shift, doesn't put in any effort.
Conceição was everywhere.
Everywhere.
He was
And he's
everywhere.
only 22. You know, obviously Sergio, his dad, the current Milan coach, was an accomplished winger in his own right, obviously for Lazio and Inter in the late 90s and early 90s. But I think Francesco has a lot more in his locker in terms of he can beat his men. He's good at dribbling, one-on-one duels. And the fact that he does help out, it reminded me a lot of Pavel Nedved in that sense, obviously the other side. But the fact that he's good going forward, but he also puts in a shift going back, and that Juventus fans love those kind of wingers that are good in both halves of the pitch. And
Chiesa is gone.
Yeah.
Conceição's in.
exactly.
No, it's definitely ever been a better time of it than his dad, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the moment,
Exactly.
yeah. I mean, what Sergio would give to get his son over to...
Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
to have him over, I think it would be...
And I think if you look at Juve's wingers like Kenan Yildiz and Nico Gonzalez, they're not particularly quick. They don't have that burst of acceleration.
Yeah.
But Conceição does, and he's so good at beating his man in one-on-ones, and Juve need that.
Let's have a look at this 11 just quickly. It's a very different looking 11 to what Allegri had in the last, or even Pirlo and Sarri. So you've got Nico Gonzalez, McKennie's a lot of versatility in this side because McKennie could be a pivot, could be box to box, could play behind the striker. He's playing behind Colomboani, Conceição on the right wing, Gonzalez on the left. Okay, they're not always going to be at the top of their game, especially Nico Gonzalez has been up and down. Koop Miners, Thuram, that's Kefren Thuram. Then that back line, we've got Gatti, who's been their pillar.
Yeah.
You know, ex-Frosinone, ex-Serie B, and then
Was a bricklayer 5 years ago.
laying bricks, and now he's putting up brick walls. So he's at the
Nicely
back. He's
done.
got Timothy Weah on the right side, and he's played almost as a striker at times, and now he's at right back. And then you've got Savona also, who's one of the young next-gen players that have come up, and Renato Vega, new signing, Di Gregorio in goal. Gatti, no Bremer. Gatti's had to take the responsibility there, and there's also Lloyd Kelly that's come in from Newcastle, ex-Bournemouth player, over the winter transfer window. But we'll go to Adam Summerton's point last week where he said there are reasons why Juve aren't challenging for the title. It's a case of don't try and run before you can walk. And that's what Juve are trying to do now with Motta. He's trying to get them. He's trying to mold them into these versatile players. That's what I'm thinking. Anyway, in order to compete in Serie A, Adam goes on, they need the money from the Champions League, which they're still playing in. So I understand that it's important that they're fighting on both fronts, and it is. They need as much as they can from every competition. So that loss of 200 million have got some depth. No Vlahovic, I should mention, he didn't come off the bench. It could be a sign of things to come that they want to ship him out. They'll get money from that if they can then use it to fund Colomboani's shift in on a full-time basis.
Well, also Conceição is another one because he signed on loan from Porto for 7 million last summer, and Juve have the option to buy him for 30 this summer. So I think they can't sign Colomani and Conceição. It might have to be, okay, maybe we'll work out a deal and get Colomani in another year's time, but sign Conceição this summer.
Yeah, and we've seen them, needing defenders before, and they've had to put money into Renato Vega.
Yep.
They had Hughes, and they had to sell him for different reasons, but it all ties into them trying to keep their books balanced.
Yep.
They're going to need to win something soon to justify it all, surely. Juventini, we know the history, the legacy of the club, what it means to win trophies in the black and white there. But surely Motta needs a little bit more time. The media in general has been quite critical of him.
Yeah, I think what hasn't helped, and we've talked about this on the pod before, is the fact that Cristiano Giuntoli spent 200 million last summer. That's added the pressure from the get-go. But I do think, to be fair to Juventus, they are willing to stick with him, even if they don't qualify for the Champions League. Obviously, it's imperative that they do because of the financial outlay, as you mentioned. But I do think they are going to give Motta time, which is something they never give Pirlo or they never give Sarri when they try to go to a nicer way of playing football. It was one season out, even if they won trophies. So I do think they've learned from that and they're willing to give Motta another season.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting paradox for them because obviously they were serial winners under Conte and under Allegri, but particularly under Allegri, the football, as we all know, wasn't exactly exciting. You know, it wasn't pretty to watch. But then you go from, you know, it's a short leap going from winning almost every season to then playing catch up with your rivals, and whether we like it or not, money is crucial in the game.
Yeah, well, when you're at the top, everyone wants to beat
exactly.
you, and that's what Allegri went through.
I mean, you look at the likes of, you know, Milan or you know, closer to home, you look at the likes of United out of the Champions League. That you become just another club because the money that you're missing out on is huge.
Yeah, it's
and
massive.
the money is then not just in terms of transfer, but then it means that you need to become a selling club, or you need to, if not a selling club, you can't afford to keep certain players on the wage that they will like, and that means that you need to move them on because otherwise you run the risk of losing them for free. So there is all this sort of like this domino effect. It's not just the prestige of being in the Champions League, which as fans is the main thing, but from a financial standpoint, if you're not in the Champions League, then you're playing catch up with your rivals.
Yeah. I mean, case in point is the fact that Juventus, as it stands, have earned 63 million euros from the Champions League from 9 games? Like, that is serious money.
I wouldn't mind that in my account, but do the players see this as a transitional year, do you think, under Motta?
They do, but I think it only goes so far because, as I said earlier, the players need to buy into the managers and his system, but ultimately they want to win trophies. So, yeah, you can probably tell them it's a transitional season. You know, we're building towards something else. You saw it with Inzaghi in this first season Inter Milan, and with Conte at Inter Milan. You're seeing it with Conte now. Conte's been at pains to stress that Napoli aren't competing for the title. You know, it's a transitional season. You saw it with Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. You know, that the players were building toward, like he told the players, we're building towards something bigger. However, the proof is in the pudding ultimately. So if you don't win, you can tell the players we're building towards something all you like, but they want to win trophies, and you know. It doesn't take much for them to sort of become... I'm not saying that they lose faith in the manager, but you obviously become frustrated and you're like, well, show me some results.
We'll wrap up the Juventus chat there. This is the Calcio FC podcast with me, David Freeney, joined by Dan Canzian and Emmet Gates, the Destination Calcio senior writers. And what a week it is. It's Roberto Baggio week. It's his birthday. He's turned 58. Seems like it is a lifetime ago where he scored all those great goals for Italy, but everyone loves him. He's so revered around the world, arguably the greatest Italian player. Some even think he might be the best player of all time. Just judging him on the length of his career, the duration, 22 years he played, started off at Vicenza, went through Fiorentina, went to Juventus. Here he is on Emmet's chest there, wearing him on your heart there today, Emmet. Good to see. Milan, Bologna, Inter, finished up at Brescia. What a career. Some underrated goals there, which Emmet's done a piece on. 5 underrated goals. You can go check that out on destinationculture.com. 3 World Cup goals that we've written about. He scored 9 in total, along with Paolo Rossi and Vieri. He's the joint top scorer there. Let's talk about those 3 goals before we get into Roberto himself, just in case you're listening. Mr. Baggio, if you've learnt English somehow, we're going to talk about your goals at the World Cup. Let's start off because, Dan, we picked one each, and it was from the 3 different World Cups that he's played in 1990, 94, and 98. Of course, the most important or the best goal of each individual World Cup. Dan, take it away because you did 1990.
Yeah, so the 1990 World Cup, as I said in my piece, I think it's an interesting paradox because we have this idea now of, hobbying glitz and glamour and, Pavarotti belting out Nessun Dorma, which is true. And it should have been the greatest World Cup anyone has ever seen because Italy was, at the time, the home of the best league in the world by far. There was no Premier League. The first division in England was a shambles.
Yeah, when you put it into context,
Yeah, in an historical
foreign
context,
players
it-
weren't even allowed into Italy until the early 80s
Yeah, early 80s,
again.
exactly.
And it was
82, I
only
think.
the three best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Zico at Udinese, you Maradona's coming in, and that was the level, the pedigree dripping.
Yeah, it was like, and then you had obviously the likes of the San Siro being refurbished, the Olimpico being given a facelift, the Delle Alpi
Everything
being
was shiny.
built. Yeah, not that I would put the Delle Alpi in Pablo San Siro. But anyway, that's for a whole other podcast. But when you actually, and then you look at the players, you had the likes of Maradona at his peak, Lothar Matthäus, Rijkaard, Gullit, Van Basten. But the football per se wasn't actually that thrilling. If you look at it, it was very defensive. It was stodgy. It wasn't exactly free-flowing football as we know it. And yeah, there is this sort of wave of nostalgia that has been triggered by Italia 90. And I think it's interesting because when you do actually look at some of the goals that we saw at the tournament, some of the goals was fantastic. I mean, look at that. It's beautiful. It's like sort of like museum artifact kind of.
Yeah, they didn't actually kick that one on the pitch during Italia 90, but yeah.
No, I mean, this looks more like the 1970
Yeah,
goal,
yeah.
actually.
Made in the 1970s, brought into Italy for the 1990 World Cup.
And the goal that I think the goal that Baggio scored against Czechoslovakia is probably the goal of the tournament, or one of the goals of the tournament. And I love the goal. I mean, full disclosure, it is one of my favorite goals.
Yeah.
I've ever seen. And what I like about it is the lack of structure, because everything that we watch these days is structure. You see goals that are, I'm not saying that every team scores the same goals, but they tend to be very formulaic. And when you look at this goal, you see the fact that Safti Giannini receives the ball in space, and he's got so much space around him, and then he plays it into Baggio's path. And Baggio, this was his first start, because he was on the bench for the first two games, because Vicini, the Italian manager, preferred Vialli and Carnevale up front.
And this was Schillaci Baggio.
Yeah, and he gets the ball, and he's got the number 15 on his back, as you're having on your shirt right now.
Wore this in dedication to the great man, Roberto. So.
And it is like, he gets the ball in a position where a left winger would get a ball right now, and he was obviously like a number 10 at the time.
And around halfway.
Yeah, around halfway, and he goes past a defender, and it's the kind of tackle that at the tackle met its intended target.
Yeah.
It could have been like a leg break.
Ankle snapped.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then he jinks past another defender, and if you look at the videos, it's one of those things that, like, I always have an image of him touching the ball several times, but then I looked at the video again this week for the piece, and he doesn't actually touch the ball more than 3 times. He just shimmies one way, then the other.
Left foot onto the right. When you see it from the reverse angle, you see the first touch is on the left to bring it to the right, and he skips away.
And then,
he's away.
And then he turns the defenders inside out, and by the time the defender is actually facing the right way, it's far too late. Because
Miroslav Kadlec.
Yes.
The poor guy. I was going to say, I mean, what do you do? When you see those highlights, everyone knows Baggio from that goal.
Yeah.
And that poor defender.
Yeah,
He has to watch that and just see himself get bamboozled both ways. It was like
Until the
an
end of
off
time.
spinner, leg spinner from Shane Warne. He just had no idea where
It
he was
is
going.
exactly like that. And the thing is that by the time Baggio gets into the box, the keeper, Stejskal, is almost already diving, because it's just trying to predict which way the ball is going to go. And I don't think that Baggio actually makes a great connection with the ball either. He sort of just like strokes it into the far corner. And what really gets me is his celebration, because, it was his first goal at the World Cup, on his World Cup debut. And he runs away, and then he just collapses onto the turf, and he's almost like astonished by how good that goal was. There's the kind of like realization going, oh gosh, I've done something amazing on the grandest stage of all. And this was a difficult period for Baggio, if you want to put it in historical context. He had already been injured twice in his ACL, twice while he was
Teenager.
While he was a teenager,
Yeah.
and he was already one of the Serie A's best players, but it was 23. He had 2 big knee injuries.
He did the first one in Serie C playing for Vicenza, where he
Yeah,
started
and then
off.
on his last day.
Fiorentina took a risk to bring
Yeah.
him in, and he
then,
couldn't play for a while.
And by the Italian 90 World Cup, he had been sold to Juventus for £8 million at the time. And there was the feeling that Baggio was it really worth it? Was it worth the hassle? Was it worth the money? Everyone said, well, there is a reason why Vicini has him on the bench in the first 2 games. He's a luxury player. Italy can't carry passengers, All this sort of like the rumor that the hullabaloo around him, it was just about the fact that it was a big transfer fee going from Fiorentina to Juventus, almost causing a riot in the process. Not that he wanted any part in it.
3 days of Reds in Florence.
There's still
as a
bitterness
result.
over that at the moment. Yeah, there's still bitterness every time they play. They bring that up.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think there was very much a case of him wanting to prove himself. And, it's never been one of the most sort of like vocal and sort of extrovert player, if you want. He's always done talking on the pitch.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at it in the context, that was the moment where he probably first established himself on the
world stage.
in the minds and in the sort of like in the conscience of Italians. Scoring that goal, it was like, look, I'm here. This is what I'm capable of.
It was a statement goal.
It was a statement goal. Yeah.
And one thing, if you listen to Robbie Baggio since his career's finished, he's been quite timid. He's known as this timid character. There's two sides to the Baggio tale, just like there is with many other great footballers. But he will tell you that during that time when Fiorentina signed him from Vicenza, he spent a lot of time trying to recover. And even later on in his career, he had to train twice just to stay fit enough to make it to the pitch. So his whole, and Guardiola alluded to this recently as well, at the end of 2024, where he said how emotional he gets thinking about the pain and suffering Baggio had to go through just to keep playing. And there were times during his career where he could have given up. And if it wasn't for him turning to Buddhism and just going to buy music while he was in Florence, he'd go to the local music store. He met the salesman behind the counter. We get talking to him. He happened to be a Buddhist. And Baggio was explaining to him how, he's having some mental health issues. He needed some help in many, many ways. He didn't know he's going to play anymore. And next thing, the gentleman from, I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but he would go to Fiorentina's training camp, and Baggio would wake up an hour before the rest of the team to go and meditate and practice Buddhism so that he could keep the mental strength, the self-belief. And he also talks about his father in a lot of these documentaries, where he's taken a few of the qualities that his father tried to teach him and, try and just keep the faith. And eventually it paid off. He had to believe in himself. Everyone was losing their faith in him, but he kept it. And that goal, the first one, he talks about Fiorentina, the goal against Napoli, where he realized just how powerful he could be, but he wouldn't have been able to get to that point. That was before the World Cup. He wouldn't be able to get to that point if he wasn't able to believe in himself. So there's a lot of life lessons in Roberto Baggio's career. And that goal for Italy that you're talking about against Czechoslovakia was another milestone moment for him, because he was able to realize, I'm now on the world stage. I've done it at club level, done it in the best league, and now I've done it on the world stage in Italy, right here in front of all my home fans.
Yeah,
and that was the dive. And
I think that there's also the fact with the mental strength you're alluding to, it's important to note that like the injuries that Baggio had in today's football, it will be a significant step back, but you will still be expected to come back from that kind of stuff, with surgery. When he played, that could have been a career ender.
It was a death sentence.
They didn't have the infrastructure.
Like, if you compare the scars that you would be left with back then, where surgery on your ACL compared to the one you'll get now, it'll be like, having a minor scratch or having a gunshot wound.
And his second ACL that he sustained at Fiorentina not long after he had just joined, he had to get 220 stitches behind his knee, and he's allergic to penicillin. So there was
So is my dad, actually. They've got something in common. There you go.
They've both been to Conte Nassa, I can tell you that. It lives around the corner. So,
and he asked his mum to put him out of his misery. He's like, he thought he was going to die because of the pain and the fact that he was allergic to penicillin, and he had to go through all this pain without any medication. And the fact that he come back and reached the levels that he did, win a Ballon d'Or, it's staggering, really, when you think about it.
Yeah. I think that's why he's so universally loved, because it's very hard to find footballers who play for three of the biggest clubs in Italy to be so universally loved.
Yeah, and that's, people do love him, and he's even said that he discussed with his wife that that missed penalty in '94 against Brazil, it was a sign that he was human, because he'd done so much. Of course, he's had his ups and downs with Sacchi on the way to scoring his 5 goals that got him, and we'll talk about that goal soon, to get to that final. But he should never have played in that final. He had the hamstring injury from the semi-final, and it's just another setback in a long list of setbacks for him, and he was able to persevere. And another life lesson there from Robbie Baggio. Doesn't know that he is a philosopher of sorts, but he is.
Well, the famous Uruguayan writer Eduardo Galeano, he spoke about Diego Maradona, saying that he was the most human of the gods, and I think that applies to Baggio and why people love him, because he had this talent that was genius, but he's sadly, for rightly or wrongly, remembered for a penalty miss in a final. So it kind of shows he's one of us. He's mortal like us. He's not this. Obviously, his talent's up here, but he makes mistakes like the rest of us. He's fallible, and he is a human god.
Yeah,
and I think that's why he's loved.
Demigods, both of them, because you had Maradona that led up to 1990. Baggio then took the mantle, and he flew the flag for footballing demigods until that penalty miss where people realised he was...
I think it's significant actually on the point that Emmet is making about being fallible, because if you think of Italia 90, you think of Baggio and you think of Paul Gascoigne, who was himself a genius, albeit a flawed genius at that. But, both of them, I think that's why people could relate to the pair of them, because it was so human, so, fallible. They had Baggio's issues were mostly physical, Gaz's were, mental, and the Hulk demons he faced. But you could, as a fan, you could relate to them. They were effectively people like you will know your mates would be like them.
Yeah,
but they just happen to be phenomenally good footballers.
Yeah, and that's what he also says. Baggio has admitted that he never thought he was any better than anyone else in the team. Going back to the roots of him kicking Scotch tape makeshift footballs that he had with Eddie and his other brothers in the hallway back when he was a child. So let's move on to the next goal. That was mine. It was USA 94. It was against Bulgaria. It's the fifth and final goal that I'm talking about here. It's not the first goal against Bulgaria where he scored a fairly similar, and that's why I didn't go with this goal, probably known as his best goal of the World Cup to many, is that throw in, he gets the ball, he takes off, and he cuts in from that left wing again and curls it in the other corner this time. Instead of that near corner against the Czechoslovakians, he found the bottom corner to beat Mihailov, which is one of the best keepers of the tournament, curled it into that bottom far corner. And I went with the second goal because, to me, it's a very different goal to that first one. It showed just the momentum that Italy had. They were firing on all cylinders. They should have won the 1990 World Cup, according to many. They should be able to win this one. Baggio had such a slow start to the World Cup. He was substituted against Norway.
After 20 minutes.
Yeah, because there
there
was a red card, And then we've got him struggling against Nigeria, searing heat. He goes on about how bad the heat was. Every Italian goes on about how bad the heat was in America that World Cup. But finally, he's got to this point in his career. He's at the culmination. He smashes this ball, beautiful ball over the top from Albertini. And Baggio,
I think the ball itself from Albertini
is as good as the finish itself.
It's superb.
And it's that Albertini to Baggio combination, Roberto Baggio, because Dino Baggio also played in that game. Of the final 6 goals in that tournament, because the final ended 0-0, but there were 6 goals in the knockouts, all scored by Baggio's, 1 by Dino, 5 by Robbie. And he was hauling Italy to greatness. The whole country was on his shoulders. Very different to Italia 90, where Schillaci did a lot of it. This time it was Baggio, no Schillaci. He had Signori. We saw Zola sent off against Nigeria. He was available for that semi-final, wasn't he? But he wasn't used. He wasn't used in the final either. I wish he was. But Baggio was able to smash that ball off the laces, across the keeper. Beautiful. Found the other corner. So 1 corner for the first goal, 1 corner for the second goal. Showed just how good he was. World class. No one could touch him. Just won the Ballon d'Or. Incredible. And then we see what happened afterwards, which we don't want to touch on too much about the penalty, but we've already spoken about it. It was his moment of humility. Should never have played because he did his hamstring straight after he scored that second goal. He's come back in the second half and done his hamstring. It was taken off in tears. And that's where we see just how you can go from such a high to such a low. And that is the roller coaster ride.
And again, I think there are lessons in that particular injury, because Italy played all their games on the East Coast and they had to travel to Pasadena for the final.
Yeah. Of all places, Pasadena for a World Cup final. He marked that one down.
And
at midday, bacon sun.
May as well do Hull for the World Cup final in England.
The fact that that you have to spend 6 hours on a flight does nothing if you have a hamstring injury. Like, it doesn't help recovery in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, his preparation for the final was kicking a ball against the wall in a reception room where they have weddings.
And
like for the biggest game of your life, that is what your preparation
and
is.
there is
Well, weddings and football finals, biggest
There's
day of your life for both the women and the men.
and when Arrigo Sacchi was incredibly superstitious, and when he saw what happened to Baggio, he thought this may be a sign that, you know, the stars aren't aligning for us. And he told the Italy sort of chief press officer or communication manager, whatever you want to call him, when they got to Pasadena, he said to him, "I don't want any calls coming into my room. I don't want anyone interfering with me," because Sacchi was paranoid with people wishing him good luck ahead of any game, particularly big games. He was woken up, legend has that he was woken up at 4 a.m. by a girl calling from Bologna saying, "I just want to wish you good luck for the final, because I know that, you know, with Baggio not being at his best, you'll need all the best, all the wishes of good luck from everyone in Italy. I just want to wish you good luck." And apparently Sacchi, the moment he received that call, he just knew that the game was going to go Brazil's way.
Well, I mean, back then, you had to make a special effort to take a phone call.
Yeah.
Up against the wall. They're affixed to the wall, the big long cord. He should have just left it.
But the thing is that, like, that girl who made the call was never actually identified. And there are, I wouldn't say conspiracy theories, but
She's Brazilian.
Legend has it that someone may have actually set it up to like, just make the phone call purely to, like, derail Sacchi's...
Get in Sacchi's mind.
Get in Sacchi's mind. Also, back then, I would imagine calling an international hotel in the States from Italy must have cost a fortune.
From Bologna to Pasadena, what it cost.
Yeah, and also,
couple of million lira.
I know that this is something we're going off on a tangent, but how is it possible to just call in a hotel and go, "No, I want to be put through to, like, Italy's manager"?
Yeah, just
don't
put me
they have,
through.
like, standards of, like, don't they actually check?
Yeah, it seems...
She's ringing around every hotel in Pasadena.
hotel.
Look.
Is Italy staying here?
Arrigo's still around. We need to interview him and see if that was legit, that phone call or not. But usually you wouldn't take those. But Italians hate being wished happy birthday before their birthday as well. So that's something that Andrea Pirlo has made a real part of his playing career, was telling people, "Oh, it's your birthday in 3 days, it's your birthday in 2 days." And then on their birthday, he wouldn't wish them happy birthday. And then there's the other way, is that you wish them happy birthday the day before their birthday. And Italians just can't handle it.
They're a very superstitious bunch, Italians.
Well, yeah.
I remember Alessandro Del Piero telling the story about, obviously he's friends with Noel Gallagher from Oasis, and when Italy won the semi-final in 2006 in Dortmund, he told Noel, "Right, you're coming to the final, but you have to wear the same clothes as you wore in the semi-final for good luck." And then obviously he did, and Italy won. So Oasis had a part to play in Italy's World Cup.
Yeah.
It's not unlike Noel Gallagher to attend games. He has absolutely no interest in it. Normally,
Oh, thank you, Noel, for doing that, because I appreciate that very much. What a team that was back then. Pagliuca, Musi, Baresi, Maldini, Benarivo, Berti, Dino Baggio, Albertini, Donadoni, Roberto Baggio, and Massaro. We'll wrap up the 94 goal. We'll go to 1998. Emmet, take us to France.
I mean, it's obviously Italy didn't win France 98, but I think for Roberto on a personal level, it was a story of redemption. You know, that period from USA 94 to France 98, he almost kind of become an outcast in Serie A. He had one more season at Juve. He got injured. And then Alessandro Del Piero, a young Del Piero, come along, and basically Juventus were like, "You know what? Del Piero's quicker. He's more tactically versatile. We could actually do without Baggio, and we'll put our faith in Del Piero." So he was sold to Milan, and he was supposed to go to Milan 5 years beforehand, but there was an agreement between Gianni Agnelli and Silvio Berlusconi. Basically, Agnelli told Berlusconi, "Look, just leave Baggio for us," because Milan already had Van Basten and Rijkaard and Hullet, and they were winning everything. So he goes to Milan 5 years later, and he wins. So he wins the Scudetto with Juve in 95. He wins another one with Milan in 96, but he's not the pivotal player in either title. Obviously, Milan at that point, you have Savicevic.
So many class players for both clubs, yeah.
You had Boban there, obviously. In Juventus, there was Vialli, Ravanelli, Del Piero. So his stock has fallen. His second year at Milan is disastrous. Sacchi comes in, and them two are at war. Basically, he Baggio hardly gets a kick in the second half of the 96-97 season.
And didn't go to Euro 96 either.
And he's left him out of Euro 96. Saki basically, once Pasadena happens, Saki basically drops him for the final 2 years of his reign. Baggio tries to start a dressing room revolt to get rid of him because they're like, look, his style of play is killing us.
And he was only 29, 30 at the time, Roberto Baggio.
And they played a Euro 96 qualifier against Croatia in Palermo, and Italy lost at home. And Baggio was like, right, enough's enough. We need to get rid of this guy. He keeps chopping and changing the team. Like, Saki never played the same team twice in 5 years as Italy manager.
He went through like it was dish call-ups left.
110 call-ups.
Yeah, it was something ridiculous. So Saki ignored him.
It just proves that he loves getting on the phone. So he should have just been receptive to that girl back in
maybe
1994.
Exactly. And so then, obviously, he doesn't go to Euro 96. He's still at Milan. Saki then ends up back with a second spell at Milan for the second half of 96-97. It doesn't go well. Saki leaves. Capello comes back, who had wanted him at Milan. Capello was like, look, Roberto, there's no room for you here. It's better you find another club. There's a deal agreed with Parma and Carlo Ancelotti, who was a Saki disciple at the time, strict 4-4-2. Ancelotti rings him up and goes, Roberto, there's no room for you. I've got Hernan Crespo, Enrico Chiesa. There's no room for you here. I don't want you. So
fair enough.
He finds himself at Bologna, of all places. He was linked with Man United, I think, in that summer because Cantona had left. So you replace one Maverick for another. But he wanted to stay in Italy because at that point, leaving Italy was kind of a death sentence if to play for the Azzurri, because Serie A at that time was still the greatest league, probably in the history of the sport.
Yeah.
So he wanted to stay in Italy. He ends up at Bologna. He gets 22 goals, and then Saki leaves Italy. Cesare Maldini comes in. Cesare Maldini gives him a chance. He goes to France as an understudy to Del Piero. Del Piero gets injured in the 1998 Champions League final against Real Madrid, so he's not fit for the first couple of games. He plays against Chile, and he scores a penalty against Chile.
And that assist for Christian Vieira.
Yeah. So first of all, he has a brilliant assist. So Maldini plays a long ball to Baggio.
Yeah.
Paolo Maldini, not Cesare. Baggio one touch, like a volleyed pass into the path of Bobo Vieri, who first time finished into the bottom corner. Brilliant. Marcelo Salas then scores 2 goals for Chile. Then 5 minutes from the end, Baggio wins a penalty where he chips the ball up into the hand, hits the Chilean defender in the hand. He takes the penalty, and there's a lot of pressure because his previous penalty for Italy was the final in Pasadena. 4 years later, he's now taking another penalty to rescue a point for Italy. He scores it. The next game against Cameroon, Del Piero still not fit. He provides an assist, I think, for Luigi Di Biagio in a 3-0 win. Then you get to Austria, the third game. He's dropped for Del Piero. Del Piero's back in the side along with Bobo.
Yeah, they were going through. It was like 1970 between Sandro Mazzola and Gianni Rivera. There was this relay,
the staffetta, as they call it in Italian, where basically Del Piero and Baggio were fighting for the number 10 role. But so in the Austria, the final game, Italy's already through. Baggio and Pippo Inzaghi kind of combine nice. It's a nice give and go. And we actually see an Inzaghi assist, which that's a collector's item.
That's actually what makes it such a good goal for me because
exactly. I mean, it's not the greatest goal of the 90s scored. It's a tap in essentially from.
It's a general play goal,
but it's the general
and his final one.
Yeah, and I think it kind of caps off the redemption arc in the fact that he had 4 difficult years. Yeah. He was vilified for missing that penalty, by Italians after USN 84. And then he had worked his way back. He'd been rejected by so many clubs, outcast, and to come back. And then you get to the quarterfinal with France, and there's still a lot of debate to this day whether he should have started ahead of Del Piero, because Maldini then went with Del Piero and Vieri up front. Baggio was dropped to the bench against France, and Del Piero was basically non-existent at that tournament. Del Piero never transferred his form for Juventus like he did for Italy, whereas Baggio was opposite. He saved his best for the Azzurri.
Yeah.
Whereas Del Piero
that is the image of him against France, where he connects, the ball comes over the top and he connects with the ball.
The first time volley, and just whistles past the ball.
And he looks around and he does that, sort of like point out by how much he missed.
And he talked about that in recent years. And he did.
Sorry, that would have been one of the greatest World Cup goals ever scored.
And that would have been golden goal. So France were out. Yeah. If that goes in. But he said in recent times that he didn't realise, he watched it back, and he said he didn't realise he had that much time. If he had to do it again, he would let the ball bounce once and then volleyed, and he likely would have scored. But again, that speaks to the small margins between failure and success that kind of represent Baggio's career.
Split-second decision.
Yeah, exactly. And it just went past the post. But yeah, I think France 98 for him, he leaves a hero. You know, his reputation is restored. He gets the big move to Inter, which was a
Because he also
disaster.
scored a penalty against France in the shootout.
Exactly. I think it's Zidane and Baggio go first to kind of set the tone, both score. So he leaves France 98 a hero. He gets the move to Inter, which is a disaster, and that's I know that's for another episode. But I think that whole period he leaves, you know, it's about redemption, and you know, didn't completely mask the pain of Pasadena. I think it'll haunt him to the day he dies. But he leaves a hero. The Italian people's faith in him is restored. And again, like I said, not the greatest goal, but for what it meant and the context, it's important in his career.
Yeah, there's a story of heroism and heartbreak in each Baggio World Cup.
And I think that when you look at the 94 World Cup, it's almost a social media moment long before social media, because the penalty miss against Brazil has been, it's a clip in itself, isn't it? And everyone thinks, well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people who may be like casual fans think, oh, it cost them the World Cup. Had he scored, Brazil may well have won anyway, because they were still at a penalty to take. You know?
Yeah, and Baresi had missed already, and was it Massaro?
Yeah, exactly.
So Baggio, even if he scored that,
He was keeping
Brazil had one to win it after.
Exactly, yeah.
And
But
him and Baresi, they were identical penalties as well.
Yeah. And Baresi shouldn't have played the final.
And both had
either.
hamstring injuries,
exactly.
and both shouldn't have played.
Yeah.
So, well, there's plenty more that we could speak about Roberto Baggio. And if you want more on Baggio, head over to the standalone video that we've done on the great man, the great number 10, 15, and number 18. That's it from me, David Farini. Another episode of Calcio FC in the bag. Special thanks going out to Emmet Gates and Dan Cancian, our Destination Calcio senior writers. We'll let you know our socials, just in case you want to get in contact with us. I'm at David Farini _ Emmet.
at Emmet Gates.
And I'm at Dan _ Cancian.
And be sure to join us every Thursday for our pod on YouTube, also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And don't forget, you can watch Serie B live and exclusive in the UK, the USA, the Caribbean, and the South Americas, Mexico as well. DCTV, download that app today, or go to tv.destinationcalcio.com. Live Serie B, 3 games every week. That's it for this week. Calcio FC podcast. Remember, the destination is always Calcio.